Hey everybody, KMO here again with another cheap and easy video. Going to read some of your comments. So first, this is my channel dashboard over here. Current subscribers, 1,567. At the start of the week, it was 1,575. I wonder what happened. Alright, so videos. Hey, check it out. Here's my three-part series. It's a Keith Preston interview from 2016. Spent a lot of time converting that to a series of YouTube videos for your enjoyment, and let's check out the numbers. 254 views, 120 views, 126 views, and then one day I went out to the picnic table with my camera, sat down, and ranted into it for a bit, and threatened to vote for Trump, and 394 views. What sort of video making does YouTube promote? Anyway, then I did just a super simple OBS video, thanks to my my oldest actually, who doesn't want to be identified, doesn't want to be on camera for sure, but thanks to him for setting it up for me. Super easy, low effort video, did much better than the final video in the series that I spent a lot of time on. All right, so now to some comments from yesterday's video. All right, first is first. First, who I interviewed for the C-Rome podcasts several weeks ago now, but it was an interview that didn't get a lot of circulation, but it generated some heartfelt response from some quarters where I didn't expect it, and where I think probably First didn't expect it. But First writes, "This is a brave move, KMO." No, it's not. It's just me ranting into a camera. Anyway. "I will be rush shipping you a bright red MAGA hat." Just kidding. I'm glad, because I wouldn't be wearing it. I'm very attached to the hat that I use now as my daily sunshade. It's a WOOL 91 FM, 91.5 FM, Bellows Falls community radio station. It's the radio station where I used to do a radio, live radio version of the C-Rome podcast. It was called C-Rome Radio. Imagine that. First continues, "Joe Biden is not only the oldest candidate to ever run, but if Joe Biden were to be elected president in 2020, he would be the oldest person to become president since Donald Trump took office in 2017. On Inauguration Day, January 20th, 2021, Biden will be 78 years, 61 days old." I don't really have a lot to say about that. I think his cognitive abilities are much more important than his actual, the number of years that he has been on this earth. Some people decline early, some people stay vital into their 90s. Joe seems to have started his cognitive decline, where it seems to have accelerated shortly after he announced his bid for president. Interestingly, the Soviet Union was run by geriatrics in the 1980s. It is generally understood to be a sign that the society had no new ideas about how to course correct, and imminent collapse was at hand. Gerontocracy is a sign of collapse. Over half the U.S. population is under the age of 40. The country is run by a bunch of old-timers who have lost touch with what it means to lead all of the people. Kanye 2020. By the way, I'll get to your email as soon as I can. I have been absolutely swamped. No worries, I have no recollection of what's in that email. I'm, if you get to it, you get to it. Andy writes, "All this makes me really appreciate the proportional representation we have here in Ireland. At least you're not consigned to wasting your vote by giving your first preferences for no-hope fringe candidates." Yeah, that was part of Andrew Yang's campaign, I think ranked choice voting was what he was advocating. But yes, there are many, many ways of conducting elections other than the way we do it here in the U.S. And, for people who have lived here their whole lives, this just seems like the way to do it. And yet, people do it differently in other places, and they get different outcomes. Forget who mentioned this recently, but the purpose of a system is what it does. Kevin, for whom I praised the quality of his feedback, obliged with more. He writes, "Thank you for the shout-out and compliments. Of course, it's always a pleasure listening to your podcast and video commentary. Anyway, the thought just occurred to me. On listening to this video, are you worried at all that if a lot of people adopt your strategy, if apparent Trump support in solidly blue state rises notably, then the Democrats might interpret that to say that the country favors Trump's policies, and thus the Dems might move even further right?" And Kevin goes on to answer his own question. It's always a catch-22 with Democrats. When they receive a mandate from lots of voters, they interpret the mandate to mean that the electorate, including leftist voters, don't mind their rightward tilt. It's not a deal breaker, and thus the Dems move right. When fewer voters support the Democrats, they lose seats. They interpret that to mean that they need to be more like Republicans, and thus the Dems move right. They have a natural tendency to move right as a default. Big money achieves this effect, of course, due to the entire capitalist system that we're in. Big money acts as a magnet that only pulls both parties in a single direction. Unfortunately, I cannot offer any good solution to this paradox because it seems like grassroots fundraising was briefly, almost, powerful enough to conquer this paradox. But not quite. Big money has the upper hand now. Once again. There you go. But, I'll take a swing at the original question. Am I worried that if, people, non-Trump voters, announce that they're going to vote for Trump as a way to spank the Democrats for not only ignoring, but, ignoring and insulting with extreme prejudice the progressive wing of their party? I don't care. The Democratic Party can burn in hell. I mean, that's just where I am right now. Kay writes, as someone who follows various environmental issues, I disagree strongly that Trump and Biden are the same on these issues. I also believe that Biden/Harris will be better than Trump on the issues you care about. It's a different political environment now, and their statements now contradict their earlier positions on the drug war. Yes, they could go further. They could take further steps and be better. And you have pointed out Biden weirdly does not go for legalization even though it would make sense for him politically to do so. But do you really think that Trump and the Republicans are even going to support decriminalization, let alone legalization? Okay, I'm going to bust in here, even though the feedback isn't over, and say Obama, at the end of 8 years, I mean, he started the process a couple years before the end of his second term, but he had a very tepid, very timid experimentation with releasing people from prison who had been serving long sentences for nonviolent drug offenses when, they had been very, very carefully vetted to see if they were people who could possibly be released. Great. In his first term, in response to, being coaxed by his son-in-law and celebrities, Donald Trump, released nonviolent drug offenders from prison. Not en masse, a few select cases, but he did it in his first term. Donald Trump is convincible. I mean, maybe he didn't realize it, but when Steve Bannon was orchestrating his 2016 campaign, he ran as a right-wing populist. Then, in the early days of his administration, he sent Bannon. In the early days of his administration, he sent Bannon packing, and then, the usual swamp Republicans, basically brought him into the fold. He's not completely into the fold. The national security state still hates him and would like to replace him with anybody, including nobody, which is what Joe Biden is. Joe Biden is not going to be managing this country. He's not going to be determining policy. I don't even believe he picked his vice presidential candidate. He's an empty seat. He's Obama 3.0. And yeah, the national security state would love that. They are overdue for a new foreign invasion. But on legalization. Now, I was worried in the early days of the Trump administration because Jeff Sessions, an unrepentant drug warrior, was going to be the attorney general. And he was the attorney general for a while, and I'm so glad he recused himself, in the whole Russiagate shenanigans, and that he lost favor with Trump, and Trump sent him packing. Great. I don't fear Trump on the drug war. Trump is not an ideologue of any sort whatsoever. He is completely self-interested. He's all about, his own adoration in the moment, his own ego glorification in the moment. He has no policy agenda of his own that he cares about. And so, he is manipulatable. And, I didn't like the Obama administration on the drug war, but at any moment, they could have sent federal SWAT teams into dispensaries in California and in, Washington State and Colorado and really brought the hammer down. And the war on marijuana is gradually winding down. No party really seems to be anxious to go all jackbooty on that topic. And I'm pretty sure that, Biden-Harris is going to continue that. And along those lines, I was reading an article in Elle magazine or on their website about Kamala Harris's evolving sensibilities, or at least public statements on the topic of marijuana. When she was a prosecutor, her career was putting nonviolent drug offenders in prison for very long terms. I mean, that was her bread and butter. It's what, got her into politics. Then she was attorney general. So here's some video of her from, what year is this? 2010.
That there is sufficient taxable base.
Gold wants to use the millions of dollars projected from marijuana sales for drug and alcohol counseling and for education.
In the face of grave danger.
We asked California's current top cop, Kamala Harris, for her position on this controversial issue. Your opponent, Ron Gold, has said that he is for the legalization of marijuana recreationally. Your thoughts on that?
That he's entitled to his opinion.
California's death penalty.
So flash forward a few years, and she's making statements like, we need to legalize marijuana and regulate it. We need to expunge nonviolent marijuana-related offenses from the records of millions of people who have been arrested and incarcerated so they can get on with their lives. Very sensible, humane talk from Kamala Harris. Finger to the wind, this is the way to go. I think it is the way to go, but she's certainly no principled advocate. So yes, her position is not, it's not Jeff Sessions. It's not Jeff Sessions' position. Back to Kay's feedback. But do you really think that Trump and the Republicans are even going to support decriminalization, let alone legalization? They could have done it already. I have read, when looking for reasons to be hopeful, that Harris co-sponsored a bill for legalization and also a bill to allow the cannabis industry to access the banking system. Should this just be dismissed because of her opposition to legalization in 2014 and her bad prosecutorial actions that I don't know much about? The role of prosecutor and attorney general is different than the role of vice president, and the political pressures will be different. I object to characterizations of cartoon levels of evil that I'm getting from you about Harris, and absolutist-type characterizations in general. Well, I share your objection to cartoonish characterizations of, complex topics. So I hope that, my acknowledgement and the citing of the Elle magazine example of her evolving views counts as a bit of nuance. This exchange in the previous upload and this one make me feel more depressed. I think it's because it sounds to me like a well-reasoned case for cynicism, apathy, disengagement, and hopelessness. I'm not making a case. I'm expressing my outrage. I am outraged at the Democratic Party. Now, if you want to take that as an argument for cynicism or hopelessness or whatever, I mean, that's your business. My input here is just sensory stimulation for you to manipulate and weave into your worldview as you will, or as, your previous experiences, your existing worldview, and your temperament dictate. Spectre Makoto writes, I like Andrew Yang, but Bernie Sanders is going to just drive up the debt and make the U.S. lose reserve currency faster. We will see massive inflation and poverty as companies move into other pro-business countries. This economy is corrupt, and we need less government, not more. College is already pointless. Unless you're trying to become a researcher or scientist, you don't need to go to college. College was never meant to be job training, and it shouldn't be. The reason the U.S. has the high healthcare cost is because our healthcare system is the dirtiest industry. It's the dirtiest industry I've ever seen, so much corruption and bureaucracy, and Bernie wants to raise taxes to pay for the headline cost. Healthcare will rise infinitely and destroy our currency since they will just pump up their prices, and his solution will be more money printing. If someone like Bernie gets elected, I will move to Switzerland or Germany as the U.S. rots in more corruption and poverty. Yeah. And as somebody points out in the comment thread, the two examples that Makoto gives of where he or she would move, they both have universal health care. And Roy writes, voting for Trump is the obvious tactical vote against dystopian mob rule. And somebody asks, yeah, because that's the most pressing issue. I'm not pleased with how, the Democrats and the lefty, sort of lefty in rhetoric only on social issues, professional managerial class folk have encouraged riots. But no, I'm not worried about it. I mean, it's a bad precedent, but I'm not concerned about my personal safety or, could be that that's my rural privilege. We just don't have the population density here for that sort of, unlawful, unruly disorder. All right, and now I'm going to pop back to my original I'm voting for Trump video and read a response from somebody that I didn't even know listened to what I had to say on YouTube. All right, Sam, who I know better as Leet Minion, who has been somebody I've known since before I even started podcasting. It was somebody that I connected with on LiveJournal in the very early years of the 21st century. And he has been providing excellent feedback on my podcasting efforts for years now, and now on YouTube. So I just didn't know that Leet Minion watched my YouTube videos. But Leet Minion writes, in Vermont, I don't know that it does matter, but I hope you'll find some candidates elsewhere on the ballot that have more of what you'd want. In all probability, more of what we both want. I do think that it's a bit depraved to vote for Trump under any circumstances, though. The guy is so clearly willing to burn the country down. The Republicans are so clearly worse on many of the fronts you care about, including the drug war. Well, I need to be convinced of that. And not with public statements, but with voting records. The presidency isn't a lot of things, but also, without the presidency, you get nothing at the national level. Older voters are necessarily in any winning political coalition in this country until the demographic shift moves on. The readiness of the country for candidates like Sanders seems to have been a mirage caused by the extreme unpopularity of Hillary Clinton. It's not there yet, but what happens in the interim probably does matter. At least 35-year-old ideologues in lifetime judicial appointments really can have a big impact long after the politicians who confirmed them have gone to rot. Now, what protections have Obama-era judges implemented? What have they done to advantage normal people at the expense of the oligarchs? I mean, that's my primary issue. Now, if you're worried about social issue stuff, that Republicans are going to take away the right to abortion or things of that nature, I'm not voting on those issues. Knowing what you know of my interests, tell me how Biden-Harris appointed judges are going to advantage the working class and normal people. I remain not unconvinced because nobody has made any effort to convince me. People just invoke judges, lifetime appointments, judges. We got to get the Democratic judges. What are the Democrat-appointed judges doing for you? Show me their marvelous track record. Leet Minion continues, the prospect of that sort of trollish protest vote does make me a bit mad, to be sure. The main reason to do it, as opposed to voting for a candidate who also won't win on your vote, but whom you genuinely prefer, is to feel it was your doing if Trump wins, so you can vicariously enjoy the suffering of those who wronged you. The wealthy, connected Democratic operatives are not going to suffer. It doesn't matter how this election goes. They will still be wealthy. They will still be well-connected. They're not going to suffer. They might suffer a little bit of humiliation, but at this point, I think both the Democrats and the Republicans are fully willing and even eager to be the minority party, to be the party that's out of power. They get to complain. They don't have to do anything. They still get to ride the gravy train. They still get to send money back to their districts. They still soak up that lobbyist cash. And they bear no responsibility. If you're the minority in Congress and you can't get your agenda forward, because when you have a majority and a mandate, most voters want, even Republican voters, they want access to health care. They object to using college as, a carrot to lure you to say, hey, if you pay us a lot of money up front, you can get into the professional managerial class. No, you won't. No, you won't. It's just debt. You're just loading yourself up with debt. Now, it's, going to college and studying literature, history, sociology, politics, philosophy, logic, psychology, in addition to technical things, or arts, poetry, literature. That's all good. It's good stuff, but you should not get loaded up with unrepayable debt for that experience. I agree. That's, job training is not what college is for. And it certainly shouldn't be a toll booth to a middle-class existence, with ever-escalating fees at that toll booth. The grinding slide from frustrated contrarianism into sadistic reaction is just so aggravatingly predictable. Well, that's a great turn of phrase. I'm going to read that again. The grinding slide from frustrated contrarianism into sadistic reaction is just so aggravatingly predictable. And yet, if it's predictable, why do the Democrats rub the progressive wing of their own party's nose in shit? Why do they pile on after they've already won? Why do they just lean ever harder to the right, even when it's clear that they don't need to win this election, that doing so won't help them win this election, but they just keep doing it? Taking action for weak reasons causes a lot of cognitive dissonance. It's a big part of why so many reluctant Trump voters are now genuine supporters. You might resist that in the end, but you're not immune. But the thing I most feel is overwhelming nausea and dread. My daughter is 4. I haven't had to explain any of this to her yet. It's been a stressful year. It's going to be worse. Well, do not infect a 4-year-old with your politics. That's just gross. All right, there's been other good feedback, but because the camera battery has died, I'm going to wrap it up here. Hey, everybody. Thanks, as always, for watching. And really, it's the comments that I'm working for here, so leave good comments. Talk to you again soon. Bye.